Welcome to Game Crunch, your weekly video game podcast. My name is Mike Anastasia. With me today, we got Brandon.
Hello,
We're here to talk about games and things.
games and things.
Let's see what's on the agenda today. We're going to talk about preservation in games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, 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 yes. I'm so sorry. My brain. I just came up with this idea, and my brain literally shat the bed when you went to throw it over to me. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
I don't know, Brandon.
Okay.
I
Okay. All
guess,
right.
I
So
guess
I
let me
had.
get started. This is your
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. I guess I'll get started since it was my idea. So there's been a few things lately that's been like a common thing with games, that specifically this and last generation, where they've just been kind of lost entirely. Like we can't play them anymore. There's no way to play them anymore, and there's no way that we could have preserved them either, except through like videos. One of the most major examples I think recently is Ubisoft's The Crew, which was a online multiplayer game, but like you could play the entire thing in single player, and they shut the servers permanently down for that, which means you can never even boot that game again. So
Makes no sense.
that's yeah, exactly. It makes no sense. You mean they could let you at least play the single player aspect, but they didn't. They don't want you to. And I think that that's been a trend happening in a lot of games lately. And I think a lot of games in the future are also going to run into this problem as well. A very recent example this year, in fact, is the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game. That game is a live service online game, even though, again, it can be entirely played in single player. And I think that when everything goes away for that game, I mean, it's just gone. And there's other examples too. Now, some of these are fully multiplayer games, but for instance, the original Destiny, a game that is massive. I mean, what about that? I mean, we have Destiny 2 now. Yeah, it's the better game, but perhaps I want to go back and play the original. I
Yeah.
don't think it will be possible in the future to play it, and I actually don't even know if you currently can play the original Destiny right now.
And that's one
So,
thing. You know what the interesting thing is, though, and I'm sure there's some kind of like room for debate here.
mhm,
Um, but I guess the big question would be like, let's say they did. Let's say Destiny 1 was still available and you
yeah.
wanted to play it. Would it even be worthwhile to go back to? I think that's always a question I have for
Well,
a
so
lot of
my
those kind of like
mhm.
older, like kind of larger scale multiplayer games. Like
So
what
here's
value is
my
there when you have less people?
So Destiny as a whole has instanced combat. So think of things like individual Halo missions, like Halo
Hmm.
Combat Evolved, Halo 2, that sort of thing, and the single player aspect of that without the need for anybody in the multiplayer aspect of the game. You could do that in Destiny 1. You see what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
there is a story that reaches from Destiny 1 all the way to where we're at in Destiny 2 now. But either in the future or currently, not 100% sure, so I don't want to say yes or no to this, that won't be a thing that you can do anymore. And that kind of really sucks. I do think you might be able to do it through emulation since it was released on the PlayStation 3 and it's very easy to emulate the PlayStation 3 currently. I'm not sure how well it works though. So there's that. But I do think that that is something to like keep in mind because there are a lot of these games, and there are a lot of these games that are even live service games that we're putting money into right now. Say, for instance, Helldivers 2, which came and went because of mismanagement. But that game, that's an online game. Are we going to be able to play that in the future? Will it be gone? You know
I mean, I
what?
think the question is though. I mean,
Mhm,
kind of to a point that you made to Brand or to Nick last week.
mhm.
Um, you know, even if you could, would it be the same game?
Exactly. That's also another very good question.
Yeah. Because that's always I think the tricky thing with preservation with games like this.
Hmm.
Because something like Helldivers, obviously it's and I guess
Helldivers 2. You can
yeah,
play the original Helldivers still.
yeah, and I guess we're specifically talking about this one. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, a
That
live service game, I
that was
guess.
just me just truncating the name and
Yeah.
not thinking about that. But yeah, so but yeah, I mean, realistically, important game to gaming this year,
Mhm.
definitely. It quickly lost its relevance, but even if
Yeah.
you were say to go back to it, that thing that exists currently is not the same thing that existed months ago, just because of the change in users.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, so it's interesting because I guess there's maybe different like stages of preservation.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's like with that one, like at least with our current technology, no real way to kind of replicate that experience, even if you were to preserve the game. Although
Yeah.
theoretically, maybe someday in the future, um, that might be maybe faked. I don't know.
So I do think that currently on the PlayStation 3 emulation front, you can use like PlayStation's infrastructure to like
Mhm.
grab things that used to be on the servers. In fact, that was a thing that you would do in the past too. And here's another really good one that should have been preserved, but isn't really unless you do a lot of tinkering and know how to do all the stuff. PT. PT
Oh
is
yeah,
a very, very good example of all of this. PT is a game that that everyone knows. Like everyone knows of this game, even though it was nothing but a playable teaser. And it was not even really a game. It was just a thing, that happened.
yeah.
But there was no game that was ever attached to it. Konami took it away. You can't play it anymore. Even if you have it, people sell the systems with it on it there for thousands of dollars. There's all this crazy shit going on with that game in particular. But there are certain ways that you can install PT, and there are people that have gone above and beyond to recreate it, like on PC, for instance. But it's not the same thing. And also, the hoops that you have to jump through to even be able to get that game, even if you have it in your account to be able to play that game, is kind of a huge hassle. And I do think that that is a very big issue because a lot of games in the future, I think from the PlayStation 4, Xbox One era forward to where we're at now and even going further forward, there are a lot of things that are just going to be lost to time. And I know a lot of things like that have existed on PC in the past that are completely lost to time, completely dead. You're never going to see them again. But there's even some cases of games that were like from the 90s that people made their own like servers for to keep them alive. But it seems like game companies nowadays really, really don't want that to happen. So
No, they really
yeah,
do not.
yeah.
It seems like sometimes they go out of their way to
And make
ensure
sure
that.
it will not happen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot more of that kind of stuff lately. And
Yeah,
I think part of it is though, I mean, obviously, as games become more sophisticated, the technology running them becomes more sophisticated. Technology running them, I think in some cases, like maybe the crew, I don't know, that might have some factor in why a company might decide not to make it available. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing.
although that's correct what you're saying, that just means they went in making a game with planned obsolescence in mind.
Yeah.
Obsolescence? What is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but they planned for that game to be gone one day and for no one to be able to play it. And I don't think that's really acceptable. I think that really fucking sucks, to be completely honest.
It does, but I also think it's kind of where the industry is heading. I mean, you think about something like the cost of AI, that companies are, working to implement that into their games in different ways. We talked about that kind of as a topical question a couple months ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, something like that, that, once
Oh yeah,
it's
things are
not
going to get
worth its
way
running,
worse once
that's done.
they have
Yeah.
like AI running for like the NPCs or whatever for games, and once they pull those servers, that game's fucking dead
Yeah.
permanently. There'll be no
Mhm.
way you can ever bring it back. That's another reason why I'm against a lot of that kind of shit. I don't really like that idea. Like I do in theory, but the way that it will be implemented, like what we're talking about right now, is dog shit. That sucks. It
Yeah.
sucks knowing that currently in the retro gaming space, you can kind of get any retro game you want and play it, even in the palm of your hands. In some case, right now, you can go back to that time. You can play those games. You can see where that legacy came from. But people that grew up with PS4 or Xbox One, PS5, whatever, in the future, they're not going to have that ability. And I think it even started in the Xbox 360 because when they had like Xbox Arcade and XBLA, not XBLA, but the one that was the indie game version of Xbox Arcade that they had on the Xbox 360, those games are gone. They are just gone. You can't play them anymore. It's not even possible.
I mean, this kind of shit's been going on since the '90s. It's you could say
In
Xbox,
some
but
cases, like the Intellivision, not the Intellivision,
it's the Teleview.
Teleview. Thank you. That's the one I was trying to go with. Yeah,
Mhm.
like but people have actually recreated those recently, even in 2020, I believe it was. People actually got the original Legend of Zelda, like quote unquote Satellaview version of the game running on emulators, and that's fucking cool. But like the way that things are integrated now, it's going to be like literally impossible because of, like you said, like the AI, like the always online internet connections. And I just think there's a lot of games in general that are going to be completely lost to time. And I've got a few that I could rattle off the top of my head. One is massive, and we it's crazy to think about this, but one day no one will know what the fuck Fortnite was.
True.
And that's kind of wild to think about. Because there's no way you can what's the word I'm looking for? Preserve that game. Even now, for instance, the people that played when that game first released, it is a completely different game than it was then. So much so that they do like events where they do like, back in time events, that sort of thing, where they put out like a mode that's like this, that, and the other. And I think a lot of these games as a service games are going to be completely lost. And not even just because of, like we were talking about, not being able to, the servers closed down or whatever, but even just because of, like you were saying before, the way games are evolving, and they're evolving quickly. You could play a game similar to like Helldivers 2 that we were talking about at the beginning of this year, and right now that game is completely different than when it was when I first bought it. And that's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. And even too with those online games that you were just talking about, you do have some stuff like Blizzard with World of Warcraft, where they that game evolved so much. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, it's almost like they kind of realized that their original game had like went up, disappeared, and they're like, well, and that's what people wanted to play, and they're like, okay, well, let's.
Well, no, they saw money on the table. That's what they saw, because I'm gonna tell you right now, I know 100% why Classic came back. There were people running illegal servers for Classic with their own files of the original game on their systems and charging people specific amounts of money. And Blizzard was like, we're not getting that money. We're not getting paid. We need to get those fuckers out of there, and we need to make money, which is the reason why they inevitably brought back World of Warcraft Classic. And it greed. Like, honestly, that's the only reason right there.
But I mean, you say greed, but I mean, realistically, though, like, obviously, if there was no money on the table, like, they probably would have looked at it and just been like, whatever, and just walked away. And I think, too, I guess you made a really good kind of inadvertent point. I think that, as time goes on, for stuff more like this, stuff that can be managed more, on its own, I think we will see kind of more of an effort for, the community to kind of take over some of these services, without the original developers and publishers.
And that has happened in the past. Like we just talked about with World of Warcraft Classic, and one of my favorite MMOs, which is Phantasy Star Online. People still run Phantasy Star Online servers for GameCube that you can connect to with official hardware or through an emulator. And I mean, you can have that experience. It's not the exact same, but they try to keep it as close to the original experience as possible, and I think that's pretty fucking cool that there are a lot of people that are fans of things out there that do that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think that's great, because those are good games, and they do offer things. And granted, like we were just saying, maybe a slightly different experience than the original. But usually not. At least kind of wet that whistle. Maybe it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not having the same, let's say, cultural experience. Let's put it that way, because there's definitely a culture that was built around those games when they were first launched. I mean, like, for instance, people lived through and even some experience because they were in the same server as like the Leroy Jenkins meme that was created. Like, that's a thing that actually happened. Now, you can play the game the way it used to be back then through World of Warcraft Classic, but you're not having that same environment. You're not having that same experience that way. And I do think a lot of games have had that also happen to it, which is a different kind of preservation. But that really is something you can't help, because that's a community built around the game more so than the actual game itself. I think there's a few other things that I'd like to point out. Like, there have been some betas that I've played, and this, that, and the other, that then the game released, and it's a very different game from what people tested, and then it's a very different game from, like, by the end of that. And I do think seeing the expansion of games over time is something that is just, it comes with the territory, more or less. But like we were saying, with these games as a service games, it's a completely different beast. They are completely different from how they used to be. I guarantee you, if I were to boot up something like Fall Guys right now, that game's going to be completely different from when I played it initially. And I know Rocket League is. So, these games, they evolve over time, but you do lose the feeling they initially had. And it's sometimes interesting to see that happen in real time. But then on top of that, what's going to happen when it finally comes to end of life? Like, what do we do then? What's going on? Because, we just pull the servers to Rocket League, for instance, one of the biggest fucking esport titles, or CS. One of my favorite games was CSGO. I have nearly 7,000 hours in that game. I don't have 7,000 hours in CS2, but CSGO was replaced by CS2. I think CS2 is dog shit. To be completely honest, I think CS2 is absolute dog shit. I would love to be able to play CSGO again, but I don't have that option. It's gone. It's been taken from me. And that really sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not, and that's one thing that's always tough with sequels, because a lot of developers will be like, well, they're equivalents. No, not really.
But it's not even that. Like, here's the thing. Let me further explain this to you. It wasn't a case of the sequel took away its player base. If you go to install CS:GO in your library, it now automatically installs CS2 instead. You don't have an option of playing that game. It has literally been taken from you and changed into something different. I don't like that. That's the kind of shit that sucks, because the community of CS:GO and the feel of CS:GO is very different than from the feeling of CS2, in my opinion, based on a lot of things, everything from the way Smoked worked in those games, or didn't, to the way it does now. And when they first implemented the new smoke system in this game, the new Molly system and all that other jazz, it was really interesting. It's really cool. And now it's just kind of it feels kind of modernized to the point where it's all right, it's lost a lot of its identity, and I don't really like that element of it. So I don't like it. I wish I could play CS:GO again, but I can't. I'll never be able to play CS:GO again, and that fucking sucks.
Yeah. But what I would say too about CS:GO specifically, I was talking more about how some developers seem to kind of hand wave, oh, it's the same thing except better, but it's not really.
Not exactly.
Yeah. Because even with that, it was CS2.
It is the same, but it's not. It's just enough to be yeah, but no. Yeah, I don't know if that's exactly a good way to explain it.
Well, no, it's kind of lots of similar maps. There's lots of things in there. It'd be saying Brawl and Melee were
they removed so many gameplay elements of CS:GO in CS2. They used to have, and granted it wasn't that good, but they used to have a whole Battle Royale mode, which I'm at the point now where Battle Royales are dead. Anyone that releases it, their game is dead on arrival, and I feel the same way for for hero shooters. I'm done. I'm so tired of them. Please just go away. Give me some new shit. And I know the next new fucking hotness is going to be people copying Helldivers 2. It's already happening. I have a buddy who's actually in the gaming industry who was yeah, we're currently working on a Helldivers 2 clone. And a lot of other people in the industry are. His actually is... I don't actually know if I could say. I'll just say it's with a very popular IP based off of a movie series, and it may or may not have been hinted at already during this year's fake E3, and I think some gameplay of it was shown off, but I don't know for sure if it was, so I'm not gonna say just in case.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So
but Helldivers 2 clones, they're coming. That's the next thing. That's the next thing.
My guess is probably about 2 years we'll see all sorts of them. all over the place.
I think his release is by the end of this year. To be
Oh,
completely honest, or next year. He said, and I quote, "We were already working on this," and then Helldivers 2 went, and we were like, "God damn it!"
Hey,
So,
well, it's good that it kind of was a flash in the pan because it gives them room to keep going.
yeah. I wonder if it even has like a Steam page yet. I'm checking. Hold on a second. Oh, that's the one. Okay. No, this isn't it. This isn't it either. I don't fucking know what it's called. All right. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So that is it. Okay. Okay. So it exists, and it has existed since last year. Interesting. So they actually beat what do you call it, to the punch. However, it's not on consoles yet. So that's where it comes in.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it was just announced this year for consoles. Okay, yeah, and it's on all of them, but it's not out yet. All right. I see what's going on here. Oh, and they made it into a single player story. Good for them. I'm glad they did that. Okay. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, so I mean, but there's been these kind of things that have been going on for, oh, I don't know, for the longest time.
You know what another really good example is? The Call of Duty series, like with for instance, it's Battle Royale mode that it released.
Mhm.
They do kind of the same thing as Fortnite, where like the game you played like 3 years ago is completely different than the one you'd be playing like now, and that game's been going on for fucking ever. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
It does go a little bit further though, and I would argue that this is also a good example. Take
Yeah.
for instance, GTA San Andreas on
Okay.
PS2, Xbox original, that sort of thing. Take that game. That game's awesome. Let's think about the awful remakes that we got that were the mobile versions for consoles of the GTA the definitive edition or whatever it was, where they had San Andreas and Vice City and 3 together in one pack. But like there were so many things that were removed and were done incorrectly compared to the original game, that if like someone were to play those games through that definitive edition, quote unquote, they're going to have a much worse time than playing just the originals. And that is also a really big problem, I think, when it comes to like remakes and remasters and stuff, and preserving the original intent of the game as well. Because like you can play right now on current consoles, like San Andreas remastered, quote unquote, but it's like dog shit. It's like nothing. It's like really bad. And then also some things happen which are out of people's control. So for instance, I have San Andreas, the original PC release, but over the years, I've had bits and pieces of the game taken away from me due to licensing running out. So like some of the badass music that used to be in the game that you could get if you had the PS2 original copy or original Xbox copy, it's not there anymore. It's gone because the licenses run out. And I do think that is also a bit of a problem when it comes to preserving things, because you do have licensed tracks in games. Like in the future, like what's going to happen to Hi-Fi Rush? Yes, I know the studio closed down, which really sucks, but also there's quite a bit of licensed music in that game. Like, is that going to take away from the entire game? And it's already a digital release only, aside from the physical ones that are releasing in the future. Like, what's going to happen there? Like, there's plenty of games that use licensed music that in the future, because of these sort of things, a lot of elements that really hit hard in those games will just be taken away.
Yeah, it does happen quite a bit too. And we were just talking about for like, especially for like remakes and stuff, like Lollipop Chainsaw. It's a great example. And those licensed tracks are like, well, I don't know, we might not be able to get them, for the remake. How much of a difference it's going to make on the game? Some games, maybe not too much. Some other games, quite a bit. Sometimes too. I don't know, even play it through, like, it's going to sound strange, but Beyond Good and Evil, there's a couple different places in that game where I'm like, I don't remember this song. I don't think it was a licensing issue though. I think it may have been like like maybe a change in the remake, but but still strange and kind of one of those things where like, well, if you're going back and playing through it again,
Mhm.
how different is that experience from what it was before?
Mhm.
This case, maybe not so much, but in terms of like preservation, like we were just talking about, it is kind of a different experience, maybe than what you would have gotten, originally.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, it's all interesting. Trying to think, I feel like I just had another. Oh, I was going to talk more about the Satellaview because we did talk briefly about
Yeah,
that, but
absolutely.
there
Let's
was a
go
good
back to that.
example there that I wanted to bring up because I think we talked about it on the podcast a couple months ago, but
Mhm.
there was because there is a lot of stuff that's been left of that or lost to time because of
Oh
that.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I think one good kind of recent example that they just talked about on Did You Know Gaming a couple months ago. So there was some F-Zero tracks that
That's
were released.
right. That's where I was got a bit of this
Some of
this
the ideas.
idea for this. That and this one video I watched recently that was like games that are permanently lost to time, and it was like a list of all these games, and I was watching it, and it was actually like a really good video. I wish I could remember who it was by, but like they listed a bunch of games that like even some games that you wouldn't even think about that are just they're gone. You can't play them, or you can't play them the way they used to be as a specific thing. So yeah.
But this particular F-Zero one, I guess like sometimes I guess if people had like downloaded some stuff onto like the cartridge, then it would still be able to be like, downloaded it and like emulated and things like that. And if I remember how it worked with this one, like there's two F-Zero tracks that they did. The first one someone had it like still laying around and they were able to like download it. The second one they were not. The only footage or only evidence they had of its existence really was knowledge, and I think someone had like a VHS recording, and a fan went through and like rebuilt that second set of new tracks like just from this VHS. And they even went so far as to kind of like rebuild the backgrounds pixel by pixel. If you think about it, like track work, not as hard as say like random background stuff that nobody really pays attention to, even like on those videos, like little trees and clouds and things. Like you don't even think about like how little of a difference that makes, but there's that. So, and then even then, this is a rebuilt thing, just kind of from visuals. Like how close does it actually feel to how it played? Who knows? But it is all very, very kind of interesting. Kind of that aspect of preservation, kind of trying to rebuild thing from almost memory. I mean, really. I mean, you have some pictures there, but to use as reference, but you're not going to get. You don't have the ability to actually play it and kind of look around. Like you're really kind of just stuck with what you can see. So it's interesting. There's stuff like that. I think there was even, if I recall, I want to say that there was some stuff that may have even been lost before that with the what's that thing called? The download system that Nintendo had in Japan
Oh,
for the NES.
hold on. Let me see.
It's on the tip. It's disc something. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
Like Discoon something. I want to say. That's where my mind's going.
What was it? Fuck. It was the thing where like you went and you put the disc into like the kiosk and it did that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember what it's fucking called, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It was really cool because like they could write to the disc because it was the Famicom disk drive that they had in Japan. So fuck, I don't remember.
Let's see. So it was the Famicom disk system. Maybe that's just all it was called.
I don't know. All I remember, right, was that was where a very popular oh god, I watched a huge documentary on this one. There was a very popular, essentially shitpost game that was released, and there were only like 50 of them in existence, to the point where people just thought they were like ROM hacks and they didn't actually exist.
Yeah.
And it was called Hong Kong 97, I think it was. What is it?
Okay.
NES Hong Kong. Let me see what it is. Yeah, Hong Kong 97. Okay, so Hong Kong 97 is a really, really shit game. It's made that way on purpose. And it was very offensive. And it was essentially lost media. People also thought that it didn't actually exist, but someone found the original creator and the original game, which is
Okay.
wild. That happened in 2019, maybe 2020, somewhere in there. And the guy came out and he was like, "Yeah, I was just kind of angry at at like the industry in general, and I got someone from then Squaresoft to help me make this in like a week, and then I went to places and just put them up for sale at like mom and pop shops, and there were like 50 of them out in the wild essentially, and yeah." And no, a lot of people never really found it, and then somehow it made its way onto the internet. That's where it came from. But like the game is like popular and really well known because of the song that it plays, and also because the game over screen is supposedly a real dead body.
Oh, okay.
So there's that. And the guy outright admitted, he was like, "Yeah, so I had like this film that's like most gruesome accidents, blah 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 blah, that sort of thing. One of those really shady underground market kind of, not really like snuff films, but those like extreme films where it's like, oh, this is where something really bad happened, that were on VHS tape in Japan back in the day." And he took an image from that and used it as the indent of the title screen, and he was like, "Yeah, that's essentially where that came from." After the guy got interviewed, it was super interesting. But anyway, the point is that game was thought to be lost media. Also, it was such lost media, people didn't even think it was real, and that it was just some shit post that someone put together as like a creepypasta, a weird sort of thing. But someone actually found the original game and the original creator because of that, and tracked them down, and you were able to have this really interesting moment. And that was based off of a Famicom disk drive game. That's why I'm coming back to this. Why I'm coming back to this. And that's the reason why it was like lost to time for so long. But someone found a disc, a Famicom disc copy of it out in the wild, and everything went from there essentially. But that was like really cool. And I do think that we're not going to have those really cool moments in the future because it's just everything's digital now.
Yeah, everything is. That...
Like I have games in my Steam library that no one can ever play again. Like if you wanted to play it on PC specifically, and in the future, if you wanted to play it on console, unless you have like the original consoles, you're never playing these games again. So, for instance, I have Driver San Francisco. This game's fucking batshit insane. It is really difficult to get a hold of this game on PC in modern times because it's been completely delisted. Again, Ubisoft. Yeah, it's what they do, essentially. But the interesting thing about Driver San Francisco, I don't know if you ever played this game. Have you ever played this game?
I have not.
Okay, so the interesting thing about Driver San Francisco is the game starts with you getting into a car accident and going into a coma and nearly dying. Okay. The rest of the game is you having an out-of-body experience where you possess other drivers and do challenges with the drivers that you have possessed.
Okay.
It is fucking cool. It is batshit insane, and it's really fun, and it's only on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, so the PS3 might be able to emulate it, but there is not a really good Xbox 360 emulator currently, so without the original hardware of that, you can't just get a copy, and Ubisoft has no want to re-release this game for whatever reason, and because of that it kind of really sucks because this is a super inventive and interesting gaming concept, and it's really fun, and I remember loving this game, to be completely honest. This game's super awesome, and really weird niche titles like that aren't going to exist in the future. And I have other examples of games that just do not exist anymore in my Steam library even, which is, just crazy to think about.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a ton of stuff you think about, just the digital shops that have closed down, like the 3DS shop, the DSi stuff, especially the DSi stuff. Those are, long gone. Some of that stuff debatable on even if, they could even port it, at least currently.
There was someone that downloaded every single thing from all of those shops, but I will not say his name because he is a bad person and he will not be talked about for what he did later on down the line. But there is a person that downloaded every single thing on those shops and put it on one console for both the Wii U and the 3DS, and then donated them to some game preservation museum. But like,
Okay.
the public don't have that. Like, it's not like we're getting those games off that console. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
not like that console's always going to be there, or that account's always going to be there. So eventually that thing's going to die. But also, the guy who did it, fuck him. So who cares? And that
Yeah.
guy used to be like a very well respected guy until he wasn't.
Yeah, and interestingly, I mean, who knows what even the museum's going to do with it? I mean, I guess academically, maybe someone will be like, "Oh, I want to write a thesis paper on this obscure DSi game someday," but
Mhm.
not going to help Joe Schmo play, whatever. Even you're seeing it on mobile too. I mean, there's stuff.
Oh my god. What is that that Blade game that was on iOS?
Oh,
Heavenly Blade? Is that it? No, what is it?
Blade,
Infinite Blade. Infinite Blade. You can't play those games anymore. They're not possible. Like, the only way you can even attempt to experience those games anymore, since iOS doesn't have like emulation or anything like that actually works, is to have an account that originally purchased it and have a working old iPad, phone, whatever that could run it, and then that iPhone, most of the time you'd have to try to sideload, which is not going to work. And then on top of all of that, the only other way is to buy one that already has it installed, and that's just not going to happen. It's just gone. Like, what the fuck?
Yep, like Dead Space for iOS, like that. I actually looked at the easiest way I found. That if I wanted to play it again, and I have not tried this, but at least from what I could see, it sounded like it was almost easier to have a Vita emulate it than to actually run it on the phone again.
So Vita emulation's been getting better, so it might have actually been easier just to do that.
Well, I know, I would think so. Because sideloading on like iPhones is a pain in the ass anyways. But yeah, apparently the Vita has some way to run it. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it was never a game that was on there, but it's just easier to do it that way.
So you know what someone actually preserved that's crazy that recently came back, I think this year or the end of last? PlayStation Home. People were able to get it running on emulators with the original like home places that you could go to, which is just crazy to me, essentially, because like, what the fuck, Yeah.
I guess another way that we've had some preservation stuff over the years too, garage sales, where you get those kind of like random things. Like, what was it? The California Raisins game? I believe that was found at a garage sale.
Okay.
Like, that one was like never commercially released game.
It was probably at a swap meet like that in like California, because that's where a lot of those things go down. That's where a lot of people find those things.
This particular one, I'm like 99% sure it was originally a garage sale.
Okay.
Because I also think it was a Did You Know gaming treat.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
If I recall the way it was kind of like somewhat highly publicized at the time. I mean, the California Raisins were kind of popular.
It was in Nintendo Power, I think.
Yeah, it wouldn't
that it was
surprise me.
coming out.
Mm-hmm. And if I remember, I think someone just kind of found like a development copy of the game that was finished at a garage sale and was like, oh, strange. And then but they were good. They donated it, and so it has been preserved that way. But
I think they also ripped it to the internet first. They had someone put a ROM up online so you could actually play it. If I'm not mistaken.
There is I can't remember the website or the guy who runs its name. But there is a website that's dedicated specifically for those kind of things. Those more obscure, like maybe unreleased games, and making sure that they're preserved. It's run by a former 1UP guy, and I can't think of his name. Frank something.
Okay.
Frank Cifaldi? Maybe I think that might be what it is.
I just don't like telling people's names anymore, because even like the nicest on the outside people turned out to be like actual scumbags. I'm just like, former 1UP guy, some dude on YouTube. That's what I'm gonna go for now on, because shit, man.
Yeah, fair. I feel like, at least in this case, this person's not out there trying to be an internet personality. So I don't know, probably not as much to scour through there, but you never know.
I see.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I've exhausted my topics that I
I've
have
got a
left on
few.
my.
I got a few other things.
Mhm.
So every year there is a Steam Next Fest, which allows you to play demos of upcoming games. I have played games now 3 years ago that still do not exist, which is just insane to me. I've actually talked to people also that have been to places like PAX East, for instance. I had some
Mhm.
friends that went to PAX East in 2020, right before the shutdown happened.
Mhm.
They played some games that still have not been released to this day. So they've experienced games that just don't exist at
Okay.
all. And I've also, like I was mentioning before, I played betas of games that, like, once they're gone, they're gone. And sometimes they never come out of beta. I played, for instance, Harmonix game that they released back in, well, they never actually released it, but they released a closed beta for it. I don't remember the name of it, but it was Harmonix first person shooter. And it was a first person shooter where you had to shoot to the beat of the music that was playing. And this was like back in like 2015, 2016 when I originally played this game. I actually think I might have the original files for it sitting on my old computer that's in my um that's in my storage unit if it's still
Mhm.
there, which would be really cool. I kind of want to go through some of my old files on my storage unit computer because that shit would be wild, because I actually have a lot of things on that computer that I know are not on the internet. Because I used to test a lot of games, and a lot of games that I tested do not exist right now. Never released it, never released, never whatever, stuff like that. Like I remember we had like Halo CE maps that I used to do in the modding scene with like people in that scene, and I have a bunch of CE maps on my old PC for the original Halo game that were never released to the public. I have a shit ton of all this other stuff, and I think that's also kind of a really interesting like topic, because you mentioned, finding at garage sales, but some people find like data on old computers of things that you know never released, or if they
Yeah.
did release in a completely different state. There are some people still out there that have the original copy of Half-Life 2, which Half-Life 2 is a massive game that, like, it's known as one of the best PC games ever released. It leaked before it released,
Mhm.
and when it leaked online, the experience with the leaked version as opposed to the real version that we got several years later is very different. And there are still some people that, like, I love watching deep dives of people that play like leaked versions of games and then like compare them to the fully released 1.0 version. Those things are so interesting to watch because they're so like different most of the time, so completely different. And then like when you find content also in games, like older versions of games, that didn't ever make it or got cut. Like I remember I watched this like 3-hour video that was about Shadow of the Colossus, and like
Mhm.
all the cut content for Shadow of the Colossus that people were able to find in the data. And that shit was fucking cool when people tried to like rebuild that game. I don't know, man. Like there's so many different ways to preserve things, and there's so many different like avenues that you can like look into of different like preservation tactics and different levels of preservation. And I don't know, I kind of love it. I love seeing all that shit. And it, like I said, it sucks that with the upcoming generations it's gonna be harder and harder to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's gonna get, yeah, exactly, harder and harder with time. And I think, even there too, you run into, like we said, just from technology. I think maybe it's always kind of the bigger driver. Actually, I think of anything.
Technology can also be like a bane, because I was also looking into this one thing, and there's this game that existed. I believe it's called The Graveyard. It was on Steam. And I mean, I think you can actually still buy it. For instance, let's see, the grave. Yeah, The Graveyard. It still exists on Steam. You can still buy this game. But guess what? It doesn't run on modern computers, like at all. Like, so this is a game that you can no longer experience. It might be The Path also. The Path, yeah, The Path is another one that it was made on this technology, these different game engines essentially, and a lot of modern PCs, specifically like Windows ones, don't run these games anymore. And you're not going to go out and try to hunt down like Windows 95, a Windows 7 PC, and like have a fully rebuilt computer using just Windows 7 or whatever, because that's going to be difficult. Because again, people like Microsoft make it really difficult for you to use old OSs, and that shit really sucks because you lose things like that are built on versions of Windows and versions of game engines that don't run on current computers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's gonna be. And even think about it too, just even in terms of like how smoothly things run. Like even if you can get it to run, like sometimes those older things just don't run as nicely.
Yeah.
Just because the technology is so different. Yeah, that's. But I was even thinking too, like another kind of, I guess, example. Like, odds are if you wanted to play something like, say, Duck Hunt, like a lot of people don't even have like the technology in their house, or even
you would need a CRT because of the flashing that it does from the gun to the actual TV to track where the hit is registered. You're right. Mm-hmm. You're 100% right. And that it works that way with pretty much any light gun game now. You just can't play them.
Yeah. And Nintendo, I mean, they did release Duck Hunt on the, what was it, on the Wii Virtual Console with like or I think it was Wii U actually, with like a pointer workaround.
Yeah.
But obviously not the same. And
I've seen some of those kind of games re-released or modded to work in VR, and I do think that is a good compromise. But I really wish we could.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, I do think I do wish we could get like that original feeling back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because you cannot replicate that one. With that.
There's a game I wanted to play for a very long time that's on PlayStation 1, but I don't have a CRT TV, and also I don't have the game. So, like, what the fuck am I going to do, essentially?
Yeah, exactly. You just sit there and flap your arms and not do anything. Yeah, it's frustrating because, it's like those things. It's weird. It's kind of like, it's like this old technology that you'd be like, oh, it'd be so, you think it'd be so easy to, nope, it's not. Yeah.
Like, I would like to play Time Crisis or Point Blank 2 or Elemental Gunvolt. Those are the three games I would really like to play that are on PlayStation 1, but every single one of them require a light gun. And it's just not the same if you were to do it on something like the Steam Deck, which, I mean, it can do that, but it's not the same moving like, a mouse pointer or whatever compared to the original game. House of the Dead, another good example, another really well-known game in the arcades. You're not going to have that feeling ever again. That fucking sucked.
Yeah, no, you're not. Actually, arcades are a really excellent example of preservation, because that stuff is, I would say, even kind of more at risk. You can
those boards break down all the fucking time.
Yeah, they break down all the time. Super expensive to repair. And that one too, kind of that whole experience. Like even if you did, emulate those games, it's just not going to ever be really the same off of those machines.
I got one more really big example, and then we can call it for this one if you'd like. Okay. Here's my big example, and this one you might not even have thought about. Another form of preservation, which actually has been preserved for the most part, but not all of them. In 2023, I believe it was, Adobe Flash was discontinued. So all those Flash games people grew up with are just dead. You can't use them anymore. You can't play them anymore. You can't see them anymore. Now there has been a emulator for Flash that someone put out, which is fucking cool. However, it is kind of touch and go on how well it works. So a lot of things that were from the old internet, such as like these Flash games that were for like Cartoon Network shows or whatever, those sort of things, they're completely lost to time. Newgrounds, they're completely lost to time.
Yeah, completely gone. And some of those, I guess, even an example like topically, like, even if the relevance has gone quite a bit too, but still, exactly, it's just kind of like it's a piece of that history that's just not there anymore and can't be even like readily kind of recreated. So yeah, that's good.
I think Yeah, I think that's going to be it for me for that one. I mean, there are a few other examples. Like, I will give this one last example because sometimes it's not even the game that's lost the time; it's just a part of it. And the game example I'm going to give is Azura, which was a game that was Asura's Wrath.
Hmm. Oh
Which
yeah.
was
I'm sure about.
Asura's Wrath, which was released on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
Hmm.
However, you could still get the game, no problem right there. But the ending was a DLC, and those servers no longer exist for you to be able to get the ending DLC. So you don't get the ending to the game anymore. You
That's
just
fun.
have the game. You also don't get the cool Capcom crossover DLC, which is also part of the main game, but was a literal DLC that was required for the game. It's just the fucking sucks.
Yeah, it does. There was oh, I just had one more. What was it? It was tangential, I think. Oh yeah. Um I I know where I was going with this because you made me think of it.
Mhm.
Another kind of thing. With I can think of two examples of something similar to this. And interestingly, it's not a it's the game is still fully playable in
Mhm.
both cases, emulated even.
Mhm.
But the original experience has changed just because the part of that experience is just no longer relevant anymore. And it's Metal Gear Solid 1 and
Oh yeah.
um where's shit, Star Tropics. Do
Wait,
you know
what happened?
what?
What about Star Tropics? I don't know.
Well, so for Metal Gear, I'll talk about that first.
They took away
Um,
some of the clips and everything, so it was from actual like footage, right? Is that what
I
we're
wasn't even
talking
talking
about?
about that. But
Oh,
that
okay.
is, I think they did make some of those changes, if I recall.
Mhm.
Not wrong there. Definitely some Kojima. Yeah, I think he's kind of like George Lucas in some ways, where he's like, "This is how I want the game," and he'll pull things in and out, just
Yeah.
kind of what he likes. But so the thing I was talking about specifically, or at least kind of thinking of specifically, um, that thing when they're like, "You got to talk to call me on the codec or whatever,"
Oh my
and
god, because it was on the back of the box.
yeah, we don't have
The
fucking
back of the
boxes
literal
anymore.
box. Oh my god, you're right. And the only
Yeah.
way you can experience it now, if I recall correctly, in the special version on oh my god, that's right. I actually learned about this recently. So the collection that released this year or last year, don't remember which one it was,
Last
but
year.
whatever one. That collection, you can't plug your controller into the second controller port for the Mantis
That was going to
fight.
be my second example.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes, yes. So you actually have to change what like it in the actual gameplay settings, which is an option in there, and it obviously can't read your memory card because you don't have a memory card. So at the
Yep.
beginning of the game, you select like some of your favorite Konami games, and then it tells you about those Konami games instead. So you have lost that entire big, huge moment where you have to swap your controller to a second controller port so that he can't read your brain, and you've also lost that like moment where it starts reading off your gameplay data back to you from your old PlayStation 1 games. That
Mhm.
fucking sucks because that was such a cool moment in
Yep.
those games.
Super cool. Can't be replicated anymore.
No, it can't.
Actually, I think I got a third example, but now I'm thinking about it. Second one, Star Tropics. This one you didn't sound like you're familiar with, but similar to Metal Gear. The
Hmm.
game came with a letter that you had to
Inside the
submerge
box, right?
underwater. Huh?
Oh, the one that was inside the. I know what you're going with.
Yep.
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, you had to submerge it under the water because there's a code in there that can only be revealed if the paper, the
Yep.
letter your uncle gave you or whatever was wet. They replicated this on the Wii by making like a fake letter that if you press like the A button, it kind of like pretended it dipped it in water. I
Yeah.
don't believe they did that on the NSO. I don't remember what they did. I think they
Okay.
just probably told you what the code was instead.
Oh, okay.
But so yeah, that's lost.
Yeah.
Last example I have for it because I just thought of it because
I'm
it's
wondering if
relevant.
we were thinking of the same one because I just thought of it too.
Probably.
Okay.
What is it?
Mine was Eternal Darkness.
Yep, that's where I was going.
Yep. Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because you're not turning down your volume. Your TVs don't look like that. You're not having your video feed go off because that video feed doesn't exist anymore. That sort of thing. So it's like those sanity effects don't matter because
they
it
don't
doesn't
even, like-
actually line up with modern technology. So it doesn't even make sense if you like
Yeah.
look at it. Yeah,
Blue screen
that's
of death. People might not even get. I mean, it still exists.
there's
kind
still a
of,
blue
but-
screen of death, but it's not the same style. So yeah, again, it's all different technology, and it's very dated because of that. So I mean, yeah, but that's like references as a thing. But yeah, that's just an example of as technology advances, some things just get left behind.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess in terms of like, in this thing, preservation wise, not an issue. Like the
Yeah.
game itself is still preserved. You can stick a disc in there.
But
you
your
can play it,
experience isn't.
Yeah,
Your
exactly.
experience isn't.
Your
It's very
experience isn't
different.
preserved.
Yep.
And I think that kind of talks about. I think one of the points that we've talked about through this whole discussion is there's different degrees of preservation and kind of what you're trying to preserve. Sometimes it's the game, sometimes it's the experience, sometimes it's some of those other aspects that we're talking about. And for a game to do all of those things, very rare. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, I
to
agree.
hit everything. Yeah. Because even too, even if like for example, Eternal Darkness's case, even if that game is fully playable and preserved, you're gonna lose something, and eventually, probably just even the technology to run it probably will eventually become obsolete. It is kind of sad.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that last one because emulation is something that people are very, very much dedicated to. Like my Steam Deck can run Eternal Darkness right now, and it can run it looking better than it ever has. Do I lose a lot of the factor like we were talking about, like the experience, because it's not a TV, it's not this, it's not that, it's not the other? Yes, but I still can play the game because people are very dedicated to preserving things when it's a possibility to do so. But I think the overarching thing that we need to take away from all this is companies want to take away your right to experience these games again. Like they just don't want you to experience them anymore.
Yeah, no, and I think there's been some talk lately about changing some laws and making it so that game companies and publishers can't necessarily obstruct you from stopping to do these things. But I still think that's a long ways off from actually becoming real. Yeah. Okay, that I think with that I think I actually exhausted all my things.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that too. I think we're good.
All right, let's wrap it up then.
Yeah, I think that was a good episode.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
We had a lot of good topics on it, really. Anyways, thank you everyone for listening to us tonight. Don't forget to find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Amazon, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on game-crunch.com for all of our old episodes. If you want to reach out to us, you can send us an email at gamecrunchcast@gmail.com. Brandon?
Yep.
Any final thoughts?
Nope, I am good.
All right. That said, my name is Mike Anastasia. You can find me online, Clash Penguin, here or on your favorite gaming console. And until next week, game on.
Game on.
Little toys on the shelf, they shine. Collector's dreams in plastic so fine. Tap them once, the magic's here. Amiibo, bring them near. Mario jumps and Link's got gear. Animal Crossing friends appear. Each one brings a story bright. Amiibo, light the night. Tap the figure, watch them go. In my game they steal the show. Every world from here they grow. Amiibo magic starts to flow. Deep in dungeon or racing fast, these little toys, they're made to last. Memories from days of old. Amiibo stories told. Touch the base, the game's alive. Each moment big they arrive. Sky and sea and land we see. Amiibo set them free. Tap the figure, watch them go. In my game they steal the show. Every world from here they grow. Amiibo magic starts to flow. Deep in dungeon, approach them go. In my game they steal the show. Every world from here they grow. Amiibo magic starts the flow.
I don't know where Brandon is. It said he was online, right? Don't know.
Yeah, I was waiting to see you come online, and it turns out my Discord shut itself down. Oops.
Hey,
Sorry about that.
no, you're fine. Just took me a second to hear you because I was.
Oh, so you didn't hear? I was waiting for you to come online, and turns out my Discord shut itself down. So I was gonna be waiting a while.
I was like, that's weird. Brandon's not online, and I was like, well, let me edit the. I'm like, I'll just keep editing what had been working on
Yeah.
last week while I was waiting for you. So I was doing that, but then I couldn't. When you started talking, I couldn't discern what you said versus what you were saying in the podcast. I'm not sure what you said before.
Okay.
So
So
that's
I have a
what I was
question.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to talk about this week?
Nothing major. Why? What are you thinking?
I have literally nothing. So I was wondering if we could maybe do like a debate or something. We could figure out one or something to do for our podcast this week.
That's fine.
Unless you don't want to, and if you don't want to, then we can do something else.
No,
We can wing it. That's fine either way.
that's fine either way.
How about the fact that games are just being taken away from us and becoming lost media because of developers, and what games we've lost because of this? Because we've lost quite a few things. And like also in the future, quite a few things are just not going to work anymore. And I have some examples.
Okay, I mean, if yours is I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure I will think of things as we think of
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
We can do that. That's fine.
I guess preservation in gaming would probably be a good way to put it.
Good way to put
Like
it.
that sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can make that work. I said we don't need anything wild. I said as long as we at least get like 30 minutes on the topic, I'm fine with it. So
Yeah.
I think that should be fine. Okay. Yeah. All right, you ready to get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.